So that's what we're doing. The way we do that is with highlights and shadows. That's kind of it, right? That's how we trick the eye. That's how we see in dimension, is through highlights and shadows. If you've ever taken an art class and you try and like outline something in black, they're like, nothing in the world is actually outlined. If you look around, the way you define shapes of objects is from highlights and shadows. Nightmare. Do not do anything with like a mirror-like finish. You won't like that. You don't want anything so flat though that you can't see the highlights and shadows clearly. You are looking for pieces as you're moving through your examples of things that are like carved or ornate, and those are good words to put into your like search engine to find it. For my demo, I put in like carved stone wall or like flower carved stone wall or something like that, got me the words that I was looking for. Any kind of ornamentation that's applied on top works well also. I'm going to show a little video to talk through some of this because this person does a really good job and sometimes I'm scatterbrained. So there are a few other videos that I found that are really good resource examples. I will pass these on to you. So some things to keep in mind that they said, and I will try to reiterate, do not work on a white surface, right? Part of what makes this successful is seeing the highlights. It's really hard to highlight white, right? So let's not do that. So I went ahead and I textured my boards in like this like stone type color. You can do whatever under surface you want. Do you want this to look like it's carved into marble? Do you want this to look like it's carved into wood? Do you want it to look like it's on top of a little bit of stone? Nothing too heavily textured. That's the next project. Hold on. But like a little bit of texture underneath is great. If you want to go full out, like make a marble and then carve into it, you go right ahead. You have 2 weeks for this project. Keep that in mind.
Oh, 2 weeks?
You do. There is no class next week. I'm at USITT, so you have next week's class time to work on this as well too. I won't be here. You can come if you want. You are going to go through. You are going to get your image that you're going to do approved by me. Specifically for this one, I want to approve everyone's before you do it. Cool? Yeah. Via email is fine, but like I need to see it and give you a thumbs up before you go through it. You are only, you can see the one
easy peasy
board is all you have to do.
Easy
2 by
peasy.
2.
Thank God.
I can't do real molding.
You are basically you need a high resolution image of a 3D piece of ornamentation, applique, carving. I gave some examples below, and bring in a couple options or email me a couple options and we'll talk through them. So base it in your appropriate color or texture. Again, wood, marble. It could be solid color, that's fine. It just doesn't give as much visual interest. Up to you. Draw out your ornamentation image. So the next step is taking whatever you're doing, and like you can get really complicated. Oh, if you want, like go for it, or you can go something a lot more simple, like whatever you feel is going to be most successful to you. Again, if you feel like you're doing well in this class, please always challenge yourself a little bit. I don't want this to be an easy A for anyone. We're going to talk through how to draw this out. She was right. We use this a lot to make things look three-dimensional. We use it a lot nowadays when we don't have the budget to make it three-dimensional. So I'm going to show you an example on my website. At the top is all Trompe.
What? Oh, hell no.
So
is it a cut piece?
It is a 2D. They cut out the like silhouette of it and then Trompe it to make it look carved.
Oh my God.
So like we do this. This is a practice that is done, and they're like, yeah, we don't have time to actually 3D carve this out. And I'm like, I don't blame you. This is lovely, but
It's like the theater from Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
you're going to transfer your image. If you're doing something like panel molding, you may choose to just measure it out and hand draw it on. I brought in some drawing tools from upstairs in 211. We have drawing tools. You're going to use these. Right? There is charcoal pencils, there's regular pencils, there's chalk. Depends on what surface you're working on. Like I was working on a fairly light surface, so charcoal showed up really well. If you're working on a very dark surface, you may want to put chalk on top so it shows up. Chalk also erases really easily, which is nice.
Trust me, I know.
If you're using, you can wash chalk off too. Just get like a wet sponge and it'll wash off at the end. If you're using pencil, you may want to bring in like a kneaded eraser or something like that, or charcoal as well too, and it'll help you pick up some of your mistake areas if you don't want them in the end. This is fine. Please still follow a design. I'm making it up today for the purposes of demoing. The other thing you can do are a few other methods of transferring. I'm going to show you some. So I'm going to use this flower, for example. This is going to be our demo for today, is this flower. How do you transfer this flower to this board? Step one, just look at it and do what we call cartooning, which is just freehand draw it on. If you feel like you're a really good person at drawing, you go for it. That is not me. I am not a person that draws a lot, so I have other methods to help me. The first one, that's probably the easiest, is to transfer it on. I can print today only because I'm leaving for USITT, so I can't help you.
Oh
If you ask Chris Python really nicely, he may help you, but we can go print it out 24 by 24. We have a plotter upstairs that does that. I can stay and help people today with this, and then you lay it on your board and you transfer it. But you're like, how do I transfer it? You can, on the back side, take charcoal, take chalk, whatever you want, and you rub it over the whole surface. It takes a while. It's really annoying. Maeve saw me this morning drawing it out. And I'm gonna take my time to line it up where I want it. But you can see, right, nothing underneath. If I put this here, actually here, let's do a little one. We'll just do it from scratch. So I'm gonna take my charcoal, scribble. You want to make sure it's pretty heavily covered.
The devil from the Bible.
What?
I said the devil from the Bible.
I'm going to put it on my surface. I'm going to not touch all over it. And then you're just going to draw over the whole thing.
It's like when...
You're going to take your time with it. Now my board is slightly textured from my projects from underneath, so go slow. I want to draw out all the areas of where this flower is. Take your time with this step and it will make all of the other steps easier. The more with it, you can see I have a flower transferred.
Wow.
The more time I take, the more lines I can get there. And this is just charcoal on the back side, so if I mess up or don't like it, I can erase it away, right?
Wow.
So that's how you would go through that method. And if you have it taped, you can flip it back and forth, reline it up, and add more detail if you need. Move it out of your way while you're working. For this one, you can see I just did a quadrant, so I got one piece of it. The other thing you can do is we can't always just print it out. We are working on a 2 foot by 2 foot board today, but what if we're working on something giant? We don't want to print the whole giant thing. If that's the case, why aren't we just printing it and putting that on stage? Sometimes we need to replicate things very large. This is a great time to show you what's called gridding, which is where I lost my, there it is. You take your image and you literally put a grid over it. I took my time, I measured this out. If you remember from drafting class how to get an evenly spaced amount of lines, that's this, right? So you take and you draw this out, and then I drew grid lines on my board as well too. I did it just in this one quadrant. And then I come through and I look at my board and I say, okay, this is quadrant A1. What does A1 look like? A1 doesn't really have any parts of my flower, so I'm gonna leave it blank. Let's move down to B2. Starts getting a piece of my flower. Morning. So I look at this, and if you want to crowd, you can. But I see on B2 that it intersects kind of right at the corner of where 2 and 3 meet and where A and B meet. So I know I need to put a line right here, and I'll give myself a little reference mark. And then where does it end here? It ends kind of right in the middle of this line, maybe slightly to the left. So I gave myself a little reference mark, and then I just basically play connect the dots. And I draw this down, and that's how I freehand all of this, taking it one quadrant at a time. If your brain is struggling with this, a lot of times they'll tell you do it upside down, because then your brain is not trying to make a flower. Your brain is just following each little box and what it looks like. The other trick you can do is work with just part of your image. It tricks your brain to just following the lines then, rather than trying to fill in a whole image. Does that make sense? Does anyone want me to do more about how?
What do you mean no?
My computer. You can choose different colors. If your shadows look more blue or more brown, use blue or brown instead of black or white. I grabbed this for ease of today. I have them very watery. Like if I stick my fingers in this, you can see how translucent this is and how quickly you can see through to my skin. And then I have little containers. Oh no. And then I have little containers of more opaque. So if I dip in here, you can see more opaque. I have the same for black. I have a very thin and I have a not so thin. I have a bucket of water because that's important. This is gonna take you a long time. So I keep a bucket of water nearby so I can like keep my brushes wet and they don't dry out, right? You're gonna probably want a variety of brushes that are all very small, right? So here's some examples of brushes you're gonna wanna use. This may be the time you pull out the little detail brushes and use them. You may wanna use some of the small fitches. That's also fine. This thing looks like fun.
I love that one.
I love a good sash brush to get a nice crisp line, right? So this is the time we're gonna take our time. We're gonna work on top of a table or a surface, not on the floor where you're hurting your back. You may even choose to take this project home. This is one where you can take a couple little containers of paint because you're really only using like the 2 colors and take it home and do your detail work there at your kitchen table.
What? I said me doing this a push.
That's fine too. I don't have a straight edge. Can you grab me one from behind the door? I think I introduced this back with our brick project, but a reminder, this is a lining stick. We have really big ones, we have small ones, we have some that need to get thrown in the garbage because they're no longer straight on the edge. Most of them are trash. Traditionally, I think I told you, we do a bevel cut on the end of them. So if you were doing this in another shop, you may see them with the ends cut off like this, at this kind of silhouette. That is so your paint doesn't drip and get caught underneath. Think like if you put a piece of tape down, the paint seeps underneath. The same thing will happen with your lining stick. We don't have those here. So we make use of the tools we have and we just wipe our board clean every now and then. You may want to keep a wet sponge or something. So I'm gonna take and use this reference and I'm gonna make some panel molding. I drew out how big the panel molding would actually be, but I have no further detail within this. I may want to have mitered corners. A miter is that 45-degree cut at the corners. So I'm gonna put some tape down on my corners.
Did you
So
just eyeball the 45?
well, it's between the 2 diagonal
Oh.
points. So
I see.
no, but yes. I'm gonna put my tape down. It has a cast shadow on what's the left to you. It's very highlight on this side. It looks like it has a little bit of roundness to it, so that has some smoothness. I'm gonna start by just doing a cut line so I can kind of see where I'm working. So I'm gonna take my more opaque color, which now needs to be stirred in. There we go. I'm gonna brush off some excess, load my brush up really nicely, and I'm gonna use my lining stick to get nice, crisp lines. My cut line is going to be furthest to the outside, so I'm going to put that there. I'm going to line it up where I like it. I'm going to draw a line. You can get very crisp lines with sash brushes as long as they're in good condition. The more pressure, I'm going to just do this on the outside, the more pressure I put down, the thicker my line gets, right? So that's the same brush gave me very different results. It's all in how much pressure I apply to it. You always want to work with a fairly loaded brush, but not to where it's dripping. Dripping is bad. I loaded the paint up into it, not past the ferrule. The ferrule's the metal part. Otherwise, you just start getting drips everywhere. So I put in a cast shadow. I start looking. It gives some roundness, so we want to move in with a little bit of water next to it so the paint starts to move towards it. I'm going to put my brush there. Too far. Come back. I'm going to let this water touch on one side of my shadow line so it starts moving the paint towards it. I may come back with another dip of water and do another one next to that, so it's like making that ombre effect with water, and it's going to pull that line to start making it look curved. Then I can introduce my highlight into this. Same brush, I just wet it and cleaned it in between. I want my highest highlight on this side. I went off my board. That's bad. Need to erase it. Look at that. I fixed it. I'm going to come back through with a little bit washier of white and move it towards the middle. You may want to work all shadows and then come back with all highlights. That's fine. But you can see how we're starting to get some dimensionality to this board. We may want to take and add another bit of shadow just out here, like a little bit of a fuzzy one. Maybe that's too much, so I come back and I go over it with water. Great. Your paper towel method might be lovely to take up some of the excess. And that's gonna start giving you that 3D effect. If you were doing this on a shape like a flower, I'll go over here and dry. I would put this down and I would study the heck out of it. It's not the orientation. This is the orientation. Right? Nope. It is that way. Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm going crazy. I may start working with really little brushes. I may want to start with my darkest points first and just paint those in. Okay, I put X's where my dark ones are, so I can just follow this line. I can freehand this. I can use tools, whatever is going to work for you. This brush doesn't want to make those tight curves. Great, we're going to try this one instead.
Yes.
Yes, that's not Filbert. What is that?
I don't know, but I like that brush a lot.
I know there's one called Filbert, and I love that one.
Now, notice my cast shadows. If you look on like the really big printout, you can see it easily. Still has some translucency to it. Nothing is black until you get to like the very darkest points, right? So really pay attention to where you have opacity and that is more than other places. So I'm going to add some more black in here and start working my way through. I'm going to go shadows first. What I have in my hand. Here a shadow. And get down to nothingness. So this is like you were in a drawing class. Where else do I have shadow? In here. Too big. Don't like it. Want the little brush. Use multiple brushes. Do whatever you need to do to get this to where you're happy with it. This is that detail painting that I've told you don't do all semester. Now you can do.
Yes. No, I could do it. I love this.
Right? We're going to work.
It's Mion's paint by number.
It's basically paint by number. So much fun.
It's me, sorry.
I just thought it was mine. I'm like, no, mine's in my pocket. So I got my darkest points on there. I can come back through and I can fade some of them out with some water next to it. Water's gonna be your friend. And that I want to be a crisp line, so I'm not gonna do it there. Here I want this one starts really crisp, gets thinner, and then let's add some water next to it so it moves. Make sense?
Yes.
Work through the whole thing. As the nice British man said, bold is good because we are viewing this from far away. This is a project very specifically you are going to want to sit down and go walk to the other edge of the room and look at it and be like, yep, looks good. Then come back and work on it some more. Because up close, it's going to look real weird and jank. But like far away, it's gonna be
real
fine.
weird and jank.
Your highlights often are right next to your shadows, and you can go really bold with them. Because they're next to one another, you may not want to do them at the same time. You may want to let all of one dry before you do the other. Otherwise, highlights and shadows don't blend together. There's often a transition point where you get to that neutral color. That's what you want to be careful of. If you start getting your white and your black mixed together where you just have gray, it's going to look weird. Any questions?
Look a little J.
Don't make fun of me. This one I picked was very black and white.
This one's
Sometimes
blue.
it is easier to see color
Most white
or
shadow
see the
looks
highlights
good.
and shadows if you print it in black and white. So I'd suggest printing it in color and then printing it in black and white as well too, because that'll help you see where the shade and shadow is. I'm trying to do this all the way. What else? What other questions? These are good questions.
I can't wait to do the most complicated thing ever. I'm so excited.
Right, if you want it to be a little faded out, you just add some water and let the paint move away from where you applied it. There's more shadow up here.
We're gonna see like little figures of people online.
I'm never gonna do a figures.
Organic figures are so much easier than geometric, in my opinion.
See, look at how lovely like that ombre's out. Just with water.
Like geometric figures are so ugly.
You just hate your subjects.
Does anyone have questions? I did. So this one I googled stone or flower carved stone wall. Or I think were the words that got me to this image. Look for high resolution. So you can do something as detailed as that one if you want. You can do something as basic as this one if you want. This is a low resolution image, so you can see that like printed out, that's not very helpful for me finding my highlights and shadows. A higher resolution gives me that crispness that I need to see my lines to start making it look three-dimensional. So I'm gonna take this. It may drip, but I'm gonna go hold it over here. Does it start looking three-dimensional?
Yes.
It's dripping.
I know, it's gonna.
Excited.
But yes, that's what we're going for.